Do you want me to say something? Shall I? It's a cunning ploy to make sure we get a standing ovation by just making you stand. Wow. Well, look. For years, I stood where you are now. I joined this party when I was 16. I've watched some great Liberal leaders give some incredible speeches. Steele, Ashdown, Kennedy, Campbell, Clegg. Imagine following in their footsteps. To say it's an honour is an understatement of epic proportions. I remember sitting in the Winter Gardens at the Blackpool Conference watching Paddy give his first leader's speech when I was 18. I remember feeling not just inspired, but incredibly guilty, because I'd left home in Preston that morning, and there on the kitchen table was my round of focus leaflets, and I'd not delivered them yet. I got home and discovered that my mother had done them for me. Just, bless her. So I get to join, I get to lead the party I joined as a kid. Thank you. Thank you very much.
So firstly, I just want to thank you so much for coming on. You have had such a successful career in Parliament. You're the spokesperson for housing communities, local government and food and rural affairs. You served as a shadow cabinet minister in Nick Clegg's government. You were also the leader of the Liberal Democrats from 2015 to 2017. And you've just continued just to be a very big figure within the world of politics. So thank you so much for coming on. First question I want to ask you, sir, is please tell us about your early years and the events that motivated your decision to get into the world of politics.
Oh, now then, Micah, so where should I start? So I think you should, in Christian circles and in political ones, we should always be a bit suspicious about testimonies that are a bit too neat. I was interested in politics, I guess, to a degree. I was brought up in Lancashire in the 1980s, and I think there was, you'll have seen that the return of spitting image coming back. At the moment, as we've seen all these latex puppets of Boris Johnson and people. Well, back in the day, I think that in the day before there were 27 million channels, the internet and Netflix and everything, and there were kind of 4 channels that you could watch, and most of us didn't have a video recorder. Then there were really major shared moments where we'd all watch the same thing at the same time, millions, if not tens of millions of us at once. And there were 2 such events every week. One of them was Thursday night and therefore Friday morning at school, Top of the Pops. Did you see?
Yeah.
It was on last night. And the other was on a Sunday night, and therefore Monday morning at school, was Spitting Image. And even if you had no interest in politics, it was just funny. And so Margaret Thatcher, Neil Kinnock, David Steele, the kind of figures of the day, were lampooned, sometimes in a really kind of quite a powerfully damaging way. I think David Steele never recovered from having been depicted as in the top pocket of David Owen. If that means anything to you at all, but it's very powerful. But so I think politics I found interesting. But I think the moment that I thought I needed to be involved was also down to the fact that there were only 4 channels and not much choice as to what to watch on the telly. And I ended up watching, kind of by accident really, certainly not by my design, a repeat of Cathy Come Home, who people might remember was made in the mid-late 60s, but I watched it in 1984, I think, as a 14-year-old. And it's the story of a young woman whose relationship and marriage breaks down. They lose their home. She loses their emergency accommodation, and it's about homelessness and housing need. It's the film that kick-started Shelter, the campaign group. It broke my heart watching this. There was various things. Cathy looked like my mum. I knew people who had been homeless and in housing need where I lived. Had a family in our house, very small though it was, for 9 months because of a breakdown of another relationship. And I remember watching that, thinking, this is awful. I was in floods of tears, and I went and joined shelter as a result the next day. So I kind of, and I found politics as a way of, I guess I look back, a way of doing something about stuff that I found was outrageous and wrong. I joined Greenpeace, sometime later. And then in my first week at sixth form, I just kind of came to the conclusion that I probably ought to join a political party, because single issue campaigning is all great, but surely you want to have a comprehensive, challenge to how the world is run. And I decided I was a Liberal, so I joined the Liberals, and I had no thoughts or plans or intention that it would ever lead me to be doing this for a living.
Wow, that's really incredible, because when I was reading your bio also, all of the amazing changes you've made in Parliament are quite incredible. Like, you've supported cancer patients that didn't have to travel long distances to get treatment. You've really helped some of the most vulnerable members in society, business owners, everything. So I want to ask you, how have your values inspired you to become an effective agent for social and political change?
Well, again, and let's be suspicious of too neat a set of testimony. We're all work in progress, aren't we? And I think that I became a Christian 2 years after I got involved in politics. And I won't say that automatically and immediately changed my engagement with politics in quite the same way as it perhaps might have done. Maybe more of that later on, if that's something you want to follow up on. But I know that certainly in these latter years, I've absolutely come to view the role of a Christian in politics to be about service and about being salt and light, and not trying to pretend to be something you're not. Making sure that your ambition is, to serve the Lord and to kind of express His love in practical ways. Because love in the Bible is never gushy, mushy, sentimental, is it? It's always practical. It's always costly. And so I think that fundamentally understanding that you're here as a public servant, as a person to serve your community, and to do good for people, individually, collectively, that's hugely motivating. I'm bound to say that when you solve a big problem for somebody who's facing homelessness, or a family divided by silly immigration rules, or somebody not able to get the mental health support that they need, and then you get it for them. There's a slight bit of, there probably is a bit of vanity in there, but I also hope it's actually it's the satisfaction that you get from being able to have done good. So I think that's my major motivation. I certainly don't think that it's the job of a Christian in politics to legislate to force people who are not Christians to live as though they were. I don't think there's any value in that. I understand some people will say, well, the law should reflect what the Bible says. To a degree, yeah. I think, though, that obedience follows love, follows grace. Yeah. And so, becoming a Christian, loving God, and then seeking to obey Him, it's that order of things. And so I'm not somebody who thinks that my role in politics is to legislate in a sort of formally biblical way, but it is to live and to communicate with others in a way which I hope reflects a tiny fraction of the grace I've been shown.
The virus effectively turned summer into winter for Cumbrian tourism. Ending government funding in October, though, will mean 3 winters in a row, causing severe hardship on top of the already 312% increase we've had in unemployment locally. So will the Prime Minister provide a support package for tourism and hospitality in the lakes, the dales and elsewhere to see them through to the spring of 2021?
Minister, I'm grateful to the Honourable Member. We're certainly looking at all sorts of packages to help the tourism industry, creative ideas to help the tourism industry over the winter period, so that their winter, as it were, can continue to be a kind of summer once we can get things open again. But there are all sorts of packages that we'll be bringing forward. But I don't want to extend some of the schemes that we currently have.
Wow, I really like that answer. And one thing that I loved about your autobiography that you talked about your story, all of the political figures that influenced you. So in your autobiography, you also mentioned the policies of Margaret Thatcher and how that encouraged you to pay more attention to politics. Please tell us about that story.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, I was an awkward kid, and I think I probably still am. I'm 50, but I'm still an awkward kid. I enjoyed being on the minority side of any argument. It's why I'm a Blackburn Rovers fan. It's why I listen to obscure music. Brackets, by the way, when you get to 50, if you like obscure bands, you're much more likely to be able to have Twitter conversations with their members. Harry Styles will never bother replying to your tweet. But I'll tell you what, the bass player from Prefab Sprout does. So there you are. But that's a separate matter. And so, yeah, and I think probably in my politics as well. Now, before I really understood what the impact of politicians' decisions were, and my politics was basically based on watching Spitting Image, and I knew how unpopular Margaret Thatcher was. I was living in Lancashire. It was a very Labour sort of area. Nobody liked Mrs. T. So I kind of admired her. I thought, yeah, good for you for being unpopular. And then I ended up doing economics O-level, which for all you youngsters is GCSE. And doing economics O-level meant that I knew absolutely everything, obviously. But it meant that I had a bit more of a sense about what policies meant. And I began to compute that there was a link between the things that Mrs. Thatcher did in government and loads of my mates' folks being out of work. And unemployment was between 3 and 4 million, so something like 1 in 8 people in the country was out of work. And if you lived in Lancashire, it was more like 1 in 3. And both of my parents spent time out of work. Now, so I think there was an understanding that, Ken Livingstone once said if politics changed anything, if elections changed anything, they'd abolish them. But I don't think that's true. Margaret Thatcher, whether you admire her or like her or not, had a huge impact, certainly on the north of England, that I felt was, some people might consider it a pruning. It was very brutal pruning, if it was. And, there's whole generations that are out, and generations of people who've been workless since, and you could argue that's because of dependency culture and all that kind of thing. But it began somewhere, and it began in the 1980s when families with a record, a habit, a history of working lost the habit. So I thought that was pretty awful. I wanted to do something about it. I've never hated the woman. I do still sort of admire her, really. But I also think that she did an awful lot of harm.
Well, that's again really powerful, because I like how you felt so inspired to get through politics, to seeing how her policies impacted your friends. You were the leader of the Liberal Democrats from 2015 to 2017. Can I ask you, what were the greatest challenges you experienced leading that party?
I mean, the fact that we were all but dead, I think, is the main. I trace the history of the Liberal Democrats as a kind of a cycle of near-death experiences, and I've lived through 2 or 3 of them, and obviously I inherited one of them in 2015. We can get into the rights and wrongs of the coalition. Broadly speaking, I got into a lot of trouble. I got told off by one of our former leaders and great heroes, the late great Paddy Ashdown, because I was quoted accurately saying that I would give the Liberal Democrats for their 5 years in coalition 8 out of 10 for policy and 2 out of 10 for politics. In other words, we did a lot of good stuff, and the presentation was abysmal. It was wrong to have said it publicly, because I was at that stage the president of the party. We were still in government at that time. So it was foolish and vain and silly maybe for me to have said it, but I was 100% correct. And so I think it was obvious anyway that we were heading for a bruising in the 2015 general election. I didn't think, the party was thinking it could hold on to 30 of its 56 seats. I thought they'd be lucky if they held on to 20, I should say, and my best guess was about 15. I never thought we'd get so hammered we'd end up with 8, and that's what it was. And so the real challenge was, will we even survive? And so the thing you've got to do is give people a sense of emotional hope and purpose. And because the big thing that we've been up against, people think that the Lib Dems' problem is our legacy of coalition. I don't think it is at all, actually. I think our problem is that we got so absolutely annihilated in 2015. Relevance is our problem. And so you need to bind up people's wills. It's a bit like, I'm a football fanatic, and you know, it was a bit like taking over the reins of a newly relegated football team. Only it was a bit like when Glasgow Rangers went down from the Premier League to the third. You know, it was not one division, we'd gone down, we plummeted into the nearly a non-league. And so a lot of it's about emotional stuff. It's about inspiring the troops that it's worth carrying on. And so I picked issues that I really cared about, that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end, and I hope that would do the same for others. And I launched straight into, because that was what was happening at the time, the issue on refugees. Speaking out on their behalf, visiting Calais, Lesbos, northern Greece, and just trying to get inside the experience of people who were desperate people, who had made desperate decisions, and to advocate for them. Now, I don't know if that added more than a fraction of 1% to our opinion poll standing, but it gave, I was emotionally motivated by that and practically motivated by it, and I know it gave the party some sense of, yes, we're for something, and to be passionate about something that was so utterly important. And then came Brexit, and we made a decision a couple of weeks before the referendum. You know, we did one thing that David Cameron didn't do. We prepared for if we lost. And the discussion that we had in that preparation was, right, what do we do politically if the referendum goes the wrong way and that Leave wins? And the answer was, the minute it looks like it's going south, Tim goes to bed, gets a decent night's sleep, gets up at 4 o'clock in the morning, and does every single news programme, and is totally unequivocal about being pro-Europe and saying, well, that's the result, but millions of us still think this. Millions of us think we're an outward-looking country and are heartbroken by this. And again, it was an emotional thing. That saved the party. I'm bound to say this. I would say this, wouldn't I? But it tripled the party's membership. It led to our first by-election gain in more than a decade. And it gave us a reason to be. So I think the fact that Liberal Democrats still exist is probably my greatest achievement. But it wasn't just down to me. There's a whole lot of people who were determined that we wouldn't go quietly into the night.
Well, thank you for that. And can I also ask, what are your thoughts on young people who are experiencing further unemployment, isolation, or other negative results as a result of COVID-19 and lockdown?
I know what it feels like, and that's not good enough, but I know what it feels like. I think the thing to remember is hope is everything. Obviously, as Christians, we believe in a hope which is infinitely greater than anything else I could offer you. But I think the thing to say from a political point of view is that it's one of the reasons why I think it's worth the country getting in debt, to make sure you protect people from falling into desperate and miserable situations. Because frankly, I mean, a passionate right thing to do. And secondly, I think it makes economic sense, because the cost to the economy, to the taxpayer, of people being out of work and over a lengthy period of time, what that means for physical and mental health issues and family breakdown, all those other things that tend to be impacted by high unemployment. It might be expensive to subsidise people staying in work and to invest in the economy to generate more jobs. But it's expensive to not do that as well, and it's a whole lot more miserable also. So I think that I'd say to young people in particular, there is absolutely hope. We're going to work our hardest to try and make sure those opportunities are provided for you. But I know that actually the higher rates of unemployment are amongst the young people. It's why I think education and training is so important. We all have to go and make our own luck in this life. And people from privileged backgrounds tend to get the support and things that, you know, the rest of us perhaps don't get. So we probably go looking at our local FE college through apprenticeship schemes and what have you for how we can get support. And the government are coming up with schemes. The Kickstart programme, for example, is something that it's not perfect, but it's an opportunity for young people to get into or stay into the world of work. So don't give up. My sense is, who knows, but my sense is that the economy will begin to recover. And opportunities will present themselves, and COVID won't last forever. So, I'm sure there's a brighter situation around the corner, but no, I know what it feels like.
Thank you so much for that answer, because it gives a lot of young people reassurance and encouragement that despite the crisis, there is still hope for them. So I want to ask you, I've interviewed a variety of different gospel artists. Who is your favorite artist?
My favourite, what artist?
Yeah, your favorite music artist. What do you listen
Tell me that again, Micah.
I've interviewed a lot
My favourite music artist?
Yeah. Yeah, your music artist.
I'm a complete pop music nerd. But I gave a slight reference to them earlier on. I am absolutely besotted by the works of Prefab Sprout. But if that means anything to you, they had one top 10 hit in about 1988. But they're what is euphemistically known as critically acclaimed. In other words, not massively commercially successful. But they're from County Durham, and they're all still with us. And as I say, the great thing about loving a band that's a little bit obscure is that they're much more accessible. So the two of the members of the band I speak to quite regularly on Twitter, which is lovely. One of whom sent me a birthday message.
Oh.
But I love all sorts. I mean, I was born in 1970. I love the kind of old post-punk stuff that followed. I mean, I enjoyed punk music just because it's raw, proper early English 70s punk, not all this American rubbish that's come since. But I listen to all sorts of different stuff. I don't listen to an awful lot of Christian pop music. The one artist that I've got on my list is an outfit called Beautiful Eulogy, who are kind of an American gospel rap outfit, and they're actually pretty good. And I think in many ways rap sort of suits the gospel because of that kind of earnestness, that insistence, that self-reflection, which is part of the genre, I think. But I'm sometimes a bit critical of Christian pop music. I don't know if you're aware of the cartoon program, which is going to come back to me in a moment. King of the Hill. You come across King of the Hill?
Oh, no.
Gentle cartoon program, and American. And there's a lovely line in it, really, where the son has gone to this sort of, with his super cool pastor, has gone to a Christian rock concert. And his very small c conservative dad goes to get him because he just doesn't approve. And out comes the long-haired, ring in his nose pastor, super cool rock and roll pastor. And the dad, as he pulls his child out of this tent, he goes to the pastor and says, "Look, you're not making Christianity better, you're just making rock and roll worse." Which I think is a great line. Doesn't apply to all Christian pop music, but I have to confess I don't listen to a lot of it.
I don't blame you at times. Can I also ask you, do you find it difficult to be both? So
my apologies if you love Christian and gospel rock, I apologise.
Oh no, I'm not a fan. Yeah, I'm not a fan.
If you're in church, sing your heart out, right? But that's different.
So I also wanted to ask you, do you also find it difficult being a Christian politician in contemporary society?
So I think the short answer to that has got to be, it's to be a politician who's a Christian where we are today, is it a challenge? Yes. But so it is to be a Christian in any other walk of life. Christianity is countercultural because we serve a God who has 100% claim on our lives and who made everything. And we don't serve ourselves. And the God of 2020 is me, 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 me.
Mm.
We might not think of it like that, but it is. I'm going to live my best life. I am going to win at life. I am going to be true to myself. And we radically say, that's not the game. You are made in the image of one who is eternal, awesome, holy, almighty, and who loves you, and loved and proved his love in an immensely costly way. So it's countercultural to live like that. It's countercultural to elevate humility above pride, and it's countercultural, amongst many other things, to think grace is a good idea. It's not our idea, it was poured out upon us, but how we relate to others, that we wouldn't show spite and anger and hostility to those who make us feel uncomfortable or may show, unpleasant feelings towards us. So that doesn't matter. So it doesn't matter if you're a student, it doesn't matter if you're a bus driver, it doesn't matter if you're, a pensioner, an MP, a teacher, whatever walk you're in. Living in the world is a challenge, and it always will be. If Christianity is ever in your interface with the world not countercultural, you're probably doing it wrong.
In South Cumbria, I am 50 miles from the Scottish border. I have no desire to live 50 miles from a foreign border. Not in my lifetime, not in my children's or grandchildren's lifetimes. There are both practical and emotional reasons that this bill is the worst thing to come to this House in the 15 years I have been a Member of Parliament. Cumbria does not have a more important internal market than our relationship with South West Scotland. It is a porous border, not even recognised by many. People work on one side of the border, live on the other, go to school on one side and visit their GP on the other side. Sheep reared in Cumbria, sold in Scotland. Cattle reared in Scotland, sold in Cumbria. Farmers dependent upon common standards on both sides, about to see those standards undermined. Our farmers to be sold down the river across all nations. Every poor decision, every compromise will sow more seeds of discontent in the devolved nations, playing into the hands of those who are desperate to split us asunder. To many, this might feel academic, maybe to the genius spin doctors in Whitehall, who play with our country as though it's some kind of great board game, some game of risk. Academic for them, funny for them, a game for them. It's not for us in Cumbria, not for our farmers, not for our tourism sector. In fact, for most of us, it matters massively. It is emotional and it is practical. And you are playing games with the future of our relationship with our most important trading partners.